Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're back again with another superhero movie and another Marvel movie, but not another MCU movie, as today we're going to be taking a look at Venom, which was released in 2018. The movie centers around Eddie Brock, who's a journalist, but one day he takes his journalism a little bit too far into a hole he shouldn't be poking in, and ends up losing his apartment, his job, and his fiancée. Eddie ends up getting the journalism bug again though, and it leads him into the clutches of a symbiotic life form called Venom. The movie stars Tom Hardy in his second ever superhero role, as he also played the main villain Bane in The Dark Knight Rises in 2012. The movie also starred Michelle Williams as Anne, Eddie's ex-fiancée, as well as Riz Ahmed as Carlton Drake, the main villain of the movie. Jenny Slate was also scientist Doris Scurf, and Reed Scott played Anne's new boyfriend, Dan Lewis. The movie clocked in at a runtime of 112 minutes under technicality. That's kind of BS because the end credit scene is a total of I think about 16 minutes, which includes not only the credits obviously, but also a mid-credit scene and an entire clip of, at the time, upcoming film Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. The movie had a budget of somewhere in between 100 and 116 million, and it made a good amount of money, just over 856 million at the box office. And as far as the critical reception goes, it was overwhelmingly negative, which confuses the hell out of me, and I honestly have some theories on it. Here's the way I like to describe this movie. The critics didn't seem to like it, but the people who actually saw it did, as the audience scores for this movie overall were pretty high. And honestly, this seems like a pretty obvious case of a review bomb to me. It's not terrible, like it's fine. It's just a fine superhero movie, it's good, but yet overall negative reviews? Personally, my theory is that because the mainstream critics have such a hard-on for the MCU, they got butthurt that Sony's trying to do their own thing, because this is part of a new shared universe that Sony's doing because Sony owns the character of Venom, and they actually own the character of Spider-Man as well. They're allowing Disney to use the Spider-Man character for the MCU, and there was a big controversy about that either last year or the year before where they almost pulled him. And maybe that was part of it too. Maybe this was done by Disney going to the critics and saying, hey, give this a negative review to try to sink Sony's, different thing so they don't have to compete with the MCU and people don't get confused. Either way, don't know what's true, but what I do think is true is that this was definitely a review bomb. Because again, I'm not trying to say that this is a top tier superhero movie or this is the best superhero movie ever, but it's fine. Honestly, that's the best I can say about it. It's fine. It's a good superhero movie. And the fact that critics went out of their way to try to make it seem like this was terrible, when again, the people who actually saw it liked it, yeah, there's something fishy about that. So I guess all there is to do now is to tell you more about it. And that's what we're going to do right now, as we review Venom, released in 2018. So our movie begins with some kind of rocket coming down from space, which is run by the Life Corporation, which apparently contains 4 symbiotic life forms, which they acquired from different planets. Out of nowhere though, the rocket starts to burn up and hurtle towards Earth, and it crashes in East Malaysia. The Life Corporation is able to recover 3 of the 4 life forms, but one of them went missing. Also amazingly, the rocket ship's pilot was able to survive, and the reason is quickly revealed as that 4th life form is actually inside of him. The life form then promptly kills him and latches itself onto a paramedic. Looks like that paramedic's got a long walk ahead of her, but we'll pick up with her later. We now go to San Francisco, where we meet journalist Eddie Brock alongside his fiancée and attorney Anne Weying. Brock has a very popular investigative journalism show called The Eddie Brock Show, and he's asked by his bosses to do an interview with Carlton Drake, who's the head of the Life Foundation. Brock doesn't want to, as he thinks Drake's pretty shady, but he reluctantly agrees. To make things even more complicated, Anne is actually part of Drake's legal defense team, as he has some lawsuits coming in over human testing. And when logging on to Anne's laptop, Brock actually reads that classified information. We then meet Carlton Drake alongside his head scientist Doris Scurf, and the interview of Brock starts normal enough until Eddie does his investigative journalism thing and starts asking him about the lawsuits. As a result of that, Eddie is immediately kicked out, and not only that, but he's fired from his job. And not only was he fired, but so was Anne, and as a result of that, she breaks off their engagement. Back in Malaysia, that paramedic with the life form in her proceeds to kill a bunch of people before latching herself onto an old woman. And now it's time for a good old-fashioned time jump as we go 6 months later and Carlton Drake is trying to get the life forms to mesh with human bodies. He's starting with animals though, and he sees it mesh with a rabbit okay, so he's like, alright, that's fine, let's just do it with humans now. But Dora doesn't seem to feel too good about this. Life has really changed around for Eddie as well, and not in a good way, and we meet some of his new friends, including Maria, who's a homeless woman, as well as Mrs. Chen, who runs a convenience store which he goes to often. Mrs. Chen is also being exploited for money by some thugs in the local area, which Eddie wishes he could do something about, but he can't. Hell, Eddie can't even relax peacefully at his home as his asshole neighbor keeps blaring his guitar. Back at Drake's lab, he convinces a man named Isaac to try to bond with one of the alien life forms, but it doesn't work as the life form rejects and then kills him. And Dora has decided that she can't stand around and let this happen anymore, so she goes to find Eddie and ask for his help. Eddie basically tells her to fuck off though, as he doesn't really want any part of it. Eddie then walks by Anne's house and meets up with her as well as her new boyfriend Dan Lewis, who's a doctor, and even though it seems like she's moved on with her life, she hasn't moved on from her anger with Eddie, which is kind of bullshit, but whatever. Somehow motivated by this, I guess, Eddie decides to call Dora back and accept the job. Dora then takes Eddie into the facility where she lets him into Drake's lab to take some photos of what's happening. And while taking pictures of some of the test subjects, Eddie realizes that one of them is Maria, and he tries to break her free, triggering the alarm, but Maria attacks him, and then the life form that was inhibiting Maria leaves her, kills her, and goes into Eddie. Eddie then has the guards all over him, but don't worry as he's got all these brand spanking new superpowers out of the blue. They chase him into the forest, but he's able to evade them by climbing all the way to the top of a tall tree. Eddie then goes home hungry, like really hungry, and he can't seem to realize what's wrong with him, aside from the fact that there's someone in his head talking to him. Meanwhile, back in Malaysia, the other life form who's inhibiting that old lady then decides to latch on to a little girl at the airport. Eddie decides he needs to see a doctor, so he goes and sees Anne and Dan while they're having dinner, and he kinda makes a little bit of a scene, but Dan decides to help him. They decide to give him an MRI which flips both him and the life form to hell out, and all that Dan is able to conclude is that he probably has a parasite, but he won't know more until the lab results come back. Meanwhile, things are not going well for Dora as it appears that she's been found out. Drake tells Dora that he won't kill her if she reveals who she let in the lab, and Dora rats Eddie out, and then Drake just unleashes one of the life forms on her, which presumably kills her. Drake's bodyguards then show up real quick at Eddie's house to apprehend him, but the life form starts taking over again and knocks them all the hell out. And it appears that Eddie is a perfect host for the life form as they've meshed pretty well, and they lead the bodyguards on a wild motorbike chase all throughout San Francisco. It eventually ends with Eddie being hit by a car, but then the life form takes over Eddie's body completely and heals him before launching them both out into sea. The life form then formally introduces itself finally an hour into the movie as Venom, we can officially call it Venom now, and he tells Eddie that his goals are to get to Carlton Drake's rocket so that he can go back to his home planet and bring more of his friends here so that they can take over Earth. Oh, and also he wants to eat some people, and if Eddie doesn't want to get eaten, he better cooperate. Eddie even decides that he wants to break into the building where he used to work to plant some evidence, and with the help of Venom, he climbs to the very top of the building. However, they almost fall off as Venom is heavily affected by an airplane passing by, and this is the first time we learn that the symbiotic life forms are greatly affected by high frequencies. Eddie then plants the evidence and decides to leave for the front door, where he's met up by a SWAT team. He then decides to let Venom take over again, and Venom takes everybody out, but Anne shows up right as he's about to eat the last guy. After getting assurance from Venom that he won't hurt Anne, Eddie allows Anne to take him to the hospital, and while they're in the car, Eddie finally apologizes to Anne for all that happened. Back at Carlton Drake's lab, he's got his own problems, as the 2 other life forms he still had have died. I mean, what do you think? Another alien life forms is going to show up on a silver platter in the host body of a little girl? Well, actually, yes, that's exactly what happens, as the little girl shows up, and the life form then goes into Carlton Drake. Speaking of life forms, Anne uses the high frequency on the MRI machine to get Venom out of Eddie. Eddie then decides, fuck this shit, I'm out of here, while Venom escapes for the vents. Eddie doesn't get far, unfortunately, as he's tasered and knocked out by Drake's bodyguards, while Venom takes host of a little Chihuahua dog and then has a stare-off with Anne. Eddie comes face to face with Drake and finds out that Drake has his own little friend now as well. And that friend relays the plan to Drake that they're gonna go to his home planet, bring back some life forms, and destroy humanity. Meanwhile, the bodyguards have taken Eddie out into the forest to kill him, but they're promptly stopped by she-Venom. Wow, that's really cool. They use she-Venom for this movie, and turns out it's actually Anne who Venom is using as a host. Venom then makes out with and reattaches himself to Eddie, and reveals some things to him. First off, that other life form is a lot stronger than him, and it's called Riot, and it's what he would call a leader life form. Venom also reveals that he's had a change of heart and doesn't want to destroy humanity anymore. In fact, he wants to help Eddie save it because, much like Eddie, Venom is also a loser on his home planet, so he can relate to him. And you know what they say about losers, they're stronger together. You ever seen It? Worked out pretty well then. So Drake and Riot are all ready to go out in their rocket ship, but they're confronted by Venom and Eddie, and it's a competitive fight between Venom and Riot at first, but then Riot just starts whooping that ass. At one point, Riot actually knocks Eddie out of Venom, but Eddie rejoins with him as he figures they're stronger together. They then end up climbing up the rocket, but Anne uses some high-frequency waves to knock them all down. Now, separated from their aliens, Drake and Brock end up having a fist fight, which Eddie gets the better of, until he's promptly impaled and killed by Riot. Well, that escalated quickly. He's not dead for long though, as he quickly reforms with Venom, who heals him instantly. Riot and Drake have gotten into the rocket and it's begin launch, but Venom uses the thing that Riot used to impale Eddie to fuck up the rocket and explode it, which kills both Riot and Drake simultaneously. And as Venom parachutes Eddie into the water, he says goodbye and seemingly burns up and dies. A little bit while later, things are going pretty well for Eddie. He's got his job back, he's got his show back, and it seems like he's got his life back. He doesn't have Anne back yet, but he might soon, as turns out Venom is actually still within him and not dead, although Anne doesn't know. She kinda suspects it, but she doesn't actually know. Eddie even sets some ground rules with Venom that he can't kill good people, only bad people. How do you know who's a bad person? Well, he'll be able to figure it out. They then go to Mrs. Chen's convenience store to get some food, and we see one of those bad people, that asshole from earlier who's holding her up for money. Eddie lets Venom take over, and Venom threatens the asshole and tells him, hey, you stop doing this or I'm gonna eat you. And then he's like, you know what, fuck it, and then just eats him anyway. Eddie then asks Venom what he wants to do next, to which Venom replies that they can pretty much do whatever they want. And in the mid-credit scene, Eddie goes to a prison to interview a convicted serial killer named Cletus Cassidy. Cassidy has been waiting for Eddie's arrival, and he promises Eddie that he will get out, and when he does, there's gonna be carnage. And also, again, there's a 4-minute Spider-Verse scene at the end of the movie, but I'm not going to cover that here, as I'd rather just do that in its entirety in its own separate review. And if you're wondering if that Carnage tease was leading to anything, yes, it's leading to a sequel, Venom Let There Be Carnage, which currently is scheduled to be released on October 15th. Of this year. It was also, though, originally scheduled for September, and there's been rumors it might get delayed till January, but they've also promised it for the fall, so I think maybe it might get delayed till November. And also, the current release date is the same release date as Halloween Kills, so I don't know, we'll see what happens with that, but it's coming out in some point in the next couple months. Speaking of seconds, I also forgot to mention that this is the second time Venom has appeared in a live-action superhero movie, the first time when he was portrayed by Topher Grace in Spider-Man 3, but the less said about that, the better. I do like how they went with a different direction with him in this, though, because, I mean, obviously in Spider-Man 3, he was just straight villain. Not a very good one, but he was very obviously just a straight villain. This, they took a little bit different approach. He's an anti-hero. He's still not, you know, a great, you know, typical hero. He still, you know, eats people, and Eddie, I'm sure, will allow him to eat people. Even if they're technically bad people, he's still eating people. But at least he's eating bad people. And this is one of the movies that I definitely have to stress to you. Watch it for yourself. Do not read the critic reviews and then just write it off because of that. Because I legitimately, I am convinced this was a critic review bomb. Like, they did this on purpose. They made this out to be, this got 20-30% across the board, and I don't fucking get it. This is not the best superhero movie ever by any means, but it's fine. It's a good, solid movie. Tom Hardy's performance is great. I like the anti-hero story. We got some cool tie-ins like Venom. That's a tease probably they'll use later, maybe even the next movie, and obviously the tease for Carnage. I thought Riot was pretty cool. The main villain, Carlton Drake, was an easy guy to hate. There was some fun characters like Dora the Scientist. Shame she got killed off, but she was fun. You know, I mean, it was fine. It's a fine, fun superhero movie. And do not judge this based off what the critics say. Watch it for yourself and judge it for yourself. And if you're like most people who actually saw the movie without a fucking agenda, I think you might like it. I certainly did. But that's going to do it for me this week, ladies and gentlemen. Next week on the channel, we are going to be doing Dog Soldiers, which is a 2002 action British horror film. That should be pretty fun. But that is going to do it from me today. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked it, be sure to like it. If you didn't like it, don't. If you want to follow any of my social media links, they're in the description down below. Thank you to all my patrons for supporting me and both my channels. I appreciate you guys. With all that being said, though, my name is Noah Taft. This has been my review of Venom, released in 2018, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.